Welcome once again to another edition of CNI Solutions, What's Happening Now. So, great folks of Huntsville and surrounding areas. I tell you what, we have a great show for you tonight. Some great information. We have a gentleman here by the name of Brian Lorge from the League of Women Voters here in Alabama. I tell you what, just off camera before we got started, we've been sitting down and discussing some of the things I've been saying, ooh, ah, right? So just a few administrative things. We always enjoy those times when you all hit that like button, you hit that share button, because I find, and it's not just about the numbers. What it's about is getting the information into the right household. If we can get the information into the right household to help the right people so they can know where to go to, that's awesome. And that's what CNI Solutions is about. Being a community-based organization, ensuring that we're getting the information that exists in our community, not just our local community, but our community that is very extensive outside of the Huntsville local area. So like, share, contact someone, say, hey, go to YouTube, look up League of Women Voters of Alabama. And there was a show by this organization named CNI Solutions. You may not remember the name, but I do say you will. So look this up, right? And, get this information out, okay? So another thing, Mr. Charles Fry, he's probably viewing, but he's still out of this great state of Alabama right now. So you have my beautiful face and myself and Mr. Lorge here to contend with tonight. So thank you very much. So Mr. Brian Lorge, tell me a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the League of Women's Voters of Huntsville, of Alabama.
Okay, well, I've been in Alabama since 1989, retired in 2016, and always had interest in politics, but when I retired, I had a chance to start getting involved. And I was working with some groups in Limestone County about voting registration. And the lady in charge of that also was with the League of Women Voters. And he said, well, they always need help. Would you be interested? And I started going to their meetings and kind of got hooked that we'd like to go out and do different voting services. My favorite one is we haven't been able to do since COVID, but we used to go into the high schools and work with the board of registrars and do a mock election and then register anyone that was eligible to be registered, which is basically anybody. Once you hit the age of 17 and a half, you can register. You can't vote until you're 18, but you can register when you're 17 and a half. So I started doing that, and then we do events at a lot of different places. The public libraries like to have events. Mm-hmm. We've been to the senior center. I mean, we've had even just like Walmart, something like that. We'll call someone and say, we'd like to have a voter drive, and if we're available, we'll go and help them.
Right. So 17 and a half. So the high schools, do they normally request you, or do you all do a request process? Say, hey, can we come through your...
Well, usually the first time we'll get in contact with high school and say, would you be interested in having us coming? But then once we've been there once, they seem to like it. And we'll get a point back to the school, and they may say, can you come back next year and do it again? So usually once we've been in there, they like it. They like getting the people signed up. So we've been back.
Right. So I know this is a question we probably did not discuss, but how has the COVID affected your process?
Well, like I said, my favorite thing used to be the voter drives and going in the high schools. Mm-hmm. During COVID, we couldn't do that. So we developed a process that was basically a no-touch drive-up service, and people could come up. We did the same things, but we had set up, and people could drive up in their car. We have a greeter that would give them a card that tells us they wanted to register to vote. We got much more into absentee voting because absentee voting became much more prevalent during the 2020 elections.
Right.
One of the things, again, with absentee voting is they require you to have a witness to sign that it's a was. So we set up a process where we get their ID, look at it, and do that. So during COVID, we developed this process, and we didn't have as many in-person or events like in the schools and stuff. But we did the drive-up events. We still are not getting back in schools as much as we'd like. Again, we like doing these mock elections with the board of registrars, and right now they're in an election cycle, so they're busy. Okay. They just conducted municipal elections, and they've got the general election coming up in November. But hopefully, once that's done, we'll start going back and doing our regular events in the schools.
Okay, so I'm going to ask mock elections. Can you kind of be descriptive when it comes to mock elections?
Oh, sure. It's a real fun thing we do, and we do these only in Madison County because the Board of Registers has a person that's willing to do them.
Mhm.
But we take all the equipment you would see in a regular election, the iPads people use to register, the tabulators that you use to put the machines in.
Right.
We develop some questions, usually, it's not real elections, but questions about scholarships, schools, services for young people.
Mhm.
They develop ballots for us, and we go through the whole process. We'll get a list from the school beforehand and at people. So again, these are people that have just registered, probably never voted before. So they get to see how the whole process works before they show up the first time in a real election. And then, like I say, we run them through the mock election, and then if they haven't registered yet, we'll run them through the registration process.
Okay. So I think you said that's something that you kind of enjoy. Is there success normally in the numbers when it comes to mock elections?
Yeah, I mean, the mock elections in the schools in general, that's one of the reasons I love it. Again, it depends which school it is, but if it's a Sparkman or one of the larger schools, they'll usually set us up either in an auditorium or the gymnasium, and we'll get 100 to 200 kids in there. We'll divide them up. If they have a cell phone and they know the driver's license number, we can do it on phone, and usually that's about 80%. And then the other 20% we'll take over and do the old paper forms and walk them through that. But we can, in an hour, register 150, 200 folks, which is, I think, tremendous use of our time.
Yes, I think so. I know the registration process, there are many different organizations out there that do have their own form of their own registration process. But I will say about myself, registration is one thing, but getting out to the polls, folks, is another. So try to ensure that you're getting out to the polls and voting. And I know Alabama had some. Did Alabama have any changes to the process when it comes to getting to the polls? I mean, as far as voting is concerned.
In regards to COVID?
No, in regards to, I know some other parts of the country made some changes when it comes to IDs and things of that nature. So
right now, Alabama hasn't had many major changes. There were a couple of minor ones, but I think the process of people going to the polls will still be the same. You have to make sure you have an ID, though. And one of there's quite a large number of IDs that are acceptable. But what we found out with the poll pads is the easiest thing to use is driver's license. So most people are using their Alabama driver's license now.
Right.
If I could double back for a minute,
okay.
One of the things you talked about is elections, and one of the messages we spread as legal and voters is every election is important.
Yes.
I was, obviously in 2020, I think turnout was around 80% as a presidential election. Where in the, I hate the term, off-year elections, or somewhere not like the president, we had about 25% turnout for the primary, and it was down about 12.5% for the runoff. And that's just not good enough turnout.
Right.
We have the election coming up on November 8th. And again, I'm hoping that I'm not expecting 80%, but hopefully we get up to 60, 70%. Again, we're going to be electing a U.S. senator, a congressman, a governor, a lot of other statewide offices, but people tend to not understand the importance of electing state representatives, state senators. They're critical to funding, healthcare, schools, redistricting. And so a lot of people tend to say, oh, gee, it's not a president, like I'm not going to vote. We need to make sure we get everyone out to vote.
Yeah, and I've been one of those people, right? And in my travels to different places in my work, I found that most of the time I only requested an absentee ballot when it was a major election, was considered a major presidential election. And now that I am here in Huntsville, Alabama, and I'm involved with CNI Solutions, and being that it's a community-based organization, and we've talked to so many people that when it comes down to the local, your county, your state, your regional, those elections, there are some decision makers that are in those elections. Things that may not be happening in your area. Those people who are being elected, they have a say so. They're making decisions. And if you feel as though the decisions aren't being made in your favor, then get out and vote. Please get out and vote. So what steps do you take to get the voters out there?
Okay. Well, again, starting with number one is registration. And again, we'll go and do registration drives. One of the things we urge is that you go to the Secretary of State's website, which is alabamavotes.gov,
Yes.
and check your registration, because every 4 years they do a purge of the voting rolls. Hopefully people voted in the primary and the runoff, but if you didn't, I suggest you go and do that before the general election. There's a couple things you need to do. One is check. If you go to that page, and about the middle of the page, it says My Voting Information. You can go there, put in your name and your birth date, and tell them you're not a robot, and then they will go ahead and will give you your information. First of all, check, make sure your status is active.
Okay.
If you're not active, the best thing to do is before the registration cutoff date, submit a new application. Then when you show up on election day, you'll be good to vote. But if you show up and you're inactive, you'll just have to do it's a verification update form, and then you can vote a regular ballot, provided all the information is correct. If you've moved, then you're going to have to either do a provisional ballot if you moved within the county. If you moved to a different county, you won't be able to vote. So it's real important to go check your information, make sure it's up to date. The second thing I would suggest is check your polling location. They don't change very often, but again, with redistricting and again, the growth in this area, we've outgrown some of the polling locations. They've moved some polling locations. And the third thing to do, I'm going to go back to redistricting a little bit. Like for me, I'm in Limestone County, but my state Senate district changed from 2 to 1, and my House representatives changed from 6 to 5. So I'll get different representatives this year. So it's real important to go check before you get there and make sure you know what districts you're in and who's running for the offices. So when you go into vote, you make a good decision.
So making those informed decisions really matter. So alabamavotes.gov, what's that?
Alabamavotes.gov, that is the Secretary of State website.
Mhm.
They have a lot of good information there. They have sample ballots there. You can check your status. They have information. This year we have 11 amendments on the ballot, which a lot of people tend not to vote in, and those are important too. So I suggest reviewing those. If I can put in a plug for a minute,
Yes, sir.
the League of Women Voters has a system that's vote411.org. And the information is just being loaded in there right now, but it has information on all of the races. If you go in there, put your address, it will tell you all the races, all the candidates. We send questionnaires out to the candidates and ask them to put in the information. Some of them do it, some of them don't. That's a good place to go and get information. We also are in the process of putting information about the amendments on there. We go through a process. We've looked at the amendments. We try to determine what they do, what happens if it passes, what happens if they don't pass. And we may take a position of supporting it. We may take a position of recommending voting against it. We may take no position. Those recommendations are going to go to the League of Women Voters Alabama board. They'll review them, and assuming they approve them, then we'll put them on the website. But that's a good place to go for the amendments. And please don't skip those. Those are important too.
Yes, I in the wasn't there one amendment on the last?
There was on the primary. There was
Yeah.
one amendment which had to do. It was a bond issue for State Park.
Yes.
And don't ask me, I can't explain to you why they put one on the primary one and the rest are on the general election. I have no idea.
I read that, and I think what we here at CNI Solutions, what we did was we had a show, and I think part of what I'm putting notes on, right, is we did some research.
Yeah.
We did some research, and what Mr. Lorge is saying is it's a fact for not just my family and friends, Romans and countrymen and women. We need to know this information. We need to be prepared to make a informed decision. Just don't say I'm not going to, I'm not checking those, because believe me, they will have an effect on you tomorrow, and then you'll be wondering what happened. So definitely go to the alabamavotes.gov. It's tons of information. It is the official site for information. So yeah, definitely. Yes, sir.
And let me throw in one more. Another thing about getting people out to vote. It's great that you're registered to vote. Hopefully you vote. Check with your family. Make sure all your family members that are eligible, make sure they're registered and eligible, and talk to your friends about getting them to vote. The best way we can make change in the state is to get people that have similar interests as you to get together and vote and get the word to the legislatures.
Yes, I've said to some folks that my cousins and family members down in Talladega County, if any of you are watching, for those of you who have jobs and you just get the notion that you can't vote because you have to work, most companies have that. Well, is that a law? Well, which one is it? I work for most companies I work for. It's in their policy to make sure that you have time to go and vote. It's in their policy.
I was fortunate when I was working, it was for the civil service position on the Redstone Arsenal. They did give us time. they encourage people to have time to vote. And there are certain, if you are scheduled to work more than a 10-hour day on election day, you can vote absentee. So
Okay.
there are some exceptions. So yeah, you need to do whatever you can to get out and vote.
There's a question out there, and I'm almost. How does the average person? I mean, you can come up with what you consider as an average person get made aware of these changes. I'm assuming we're talking about from the amendments and things of that nature. I get. You don't want me to touch on it? No,
well,
well,
I'm going to give you a real short answer, and then
Yeah.
if you can probably add to it. Number one, on that same website, like Alabama Votes, they have a button you can click on amendments, and they have what they call the Fair Ballot Commission, which tries to explain the amendments in simple language, and that's kind of what we use as the start of our analysis with the legal and voters. So you can go there and look, and again, I'll go back. The other thing, if you're looking at the specific amendments, the 911. Excuse me, Vote 411 site is a good site. And usually, I mean, if you get on the internet and you'll find some people that are one side and one the other, and they will have stuff on, you can get information.
Okay. I'm going to ask our producer to put Vote 411 in the chat, Vote 411. And for those who are in Alabama, just if you could, please, just reminders, right? AlabamaVotes.gov as well. So I know when I get my information in mail, it kind of identifies my polling location, but I still have to go back and check to ensure. It talks about precinct and things of that nature, but I still sometimes I've looked at it before and it's been changed. Right. So definitely good folks. So there is a topic, Mr. Lords, that we kind of spoke about before we came on air that I want, and it's still in the realm of voting, but restoration. Let's talk about restoration. There's some folks out there that may feel like as though they're being left out, or you may think someone that's being left out. Please listen to Mr. Lords when it comes to restoration. What the League of Women Voters of Alabama, what they help with.
Well, let me start. In general, a lot of people believe that if you have a felony conviction, you can't vote, and that's just not true. Mm-hmm. The Alabama Constitution of 1901 was very vague. It said anyone that had committed a crime of moral turpitude could not vote, but it never defined what those crimes were. And to be honest with you, back from 1901 for quite a while, it was left up to the individual counties, and the county, it would vary from county to county, and it would vary from individual to individual depending on certain factors. Right. Over a process of time, there was several lawsuits, and in 2016, the Alabama legislature finally published a list of what are these crimes of moral turpitude, and those are now clearly defined. Mm-hmm. So anyone that has been convicted or pled guilty to a felony can go and check the list, and if they're not on that list, they can just go ahead and register to vote. Mm-hmm. If you are guilty of one of those crimes, there's some different levels. There are a couple of crimes that you cannot ever get your voting rights restored, and that includes treason if you were never impeached from office. There are a couple others that require a pardon, and those are things like enticing a child for immoral purposes, incest, murder, rape. Those you would have to request a pardon. But if you're in what we call a serve eligible, and a serve is a certificate of eligibility to restore your vote, those crimes, as long as you've completed your sentence, that includes probation and parole, and paid any fines and fees, and don't have any felonies pending, you can apply for a serve, and the state has 46 days, I believe it is, to return that certificate. You can take that certificate to the Board of Registers and register. And one of the issues we face is, even though states made these changes, they haven't really publicized it. So if you have a felony conviction or formerly incarcerated, or someone that is, we suggest you go look it up, or again, if you go to a group like Faith in Action Alabama, Birmingham Ministries, they have groups that will help you, and we try to support those groups and find out if you're eligible to vote, if you have your vote restored.
Okay. Yeah, that I found that very interesting. I was telling Mr. Lords that a couple of Fridays ago, myself and other members of the team were at Alabama A&M, And one of our programs, if you venture to our website at cnisolutions.org, you'll see that we have a program called New Beginnings. In that New Beginnings program, CNI Solutions works with ANVO. And ANVO, Mr. Lee Langston, that is one of the things that he has spoken about. I've heard him speak about when voters registration and what it did. It prompted me to go and look up that information. I know I have it on my computer, the comprehensive list of the infractions. I guess I'll use that word, that you can or cannot, be reinstated when it comes to your voters' rights. And so that is good information. So what else is there that you have when it comes to the restoration process? There's the voting part that's out there, and I know that's very, very important to the community. So any other things that you think may be important for those who are seeking? Any other organization that you may know of?
Again, I hate to mention any organization because there's several out there that are doing good jobs. Again, Faith in Action Alabama, Greater Birmingham Industries, the Poor People's Campaign. And I would just add, again, the biggest thing we're trying to do is get the word out there. When this law became in effect in 2017, the estimate was there were 250,000 people that were affected by it. 200,000 of those could have voted immediately, and 50,000 would have to go through the serve process. And the numbers right now are a fraction of that. So there are a lot of people out there that are eligible to vote that are not aware of it. There is concerns out there. When you go to register to vote, one of the questions it says is, do you have a disqualifying felony? I know because of some of the politics that have been going on in Alabama and especially other places, Florida, people are concerned about if they go to register or not eligible.
Right.
That's where I would suggest you get in contact with a group that can provide you some support, and League of Women Voters is one of them. We have resources we can go and look up and check this out and determine whether you're eligible or not to try to reduce that risk. Right. And because I know when we have done voting events, we have people are concerned about it, and I absolutely understand that. On the voter registration form, it says if you commit perjury, you could be sentenced up to 5 years in jail and fined. And we don't want that to happen to anyone. So I was just going to one of these groups if you have any doubts about it and ask them to help you with it. And again, there's groups. The League of Women Voters, we have an email address, which is VRR, Voting Rights Restoration, at lwval.org. If you send us you send your information in, and it's basically all we need is a name and a way to contact you. We'll have someone get back and contact you. You can do some research and give you a better answer. And again, these other groups can do that also.
Yeah, definitely. And not just in the Huntsville, Alabama area, because I know we have some folks that view outside of the Huntsville, Alabama area. There's a question out there. It says, is this even talked about in the prison system? I hate that they may still be able to vote.
It's a great question. And again, a lot of people in prison can vote. I don't think, again, that fact gets publicized, and we've just been the League of Women Voters has just been contacted by a national group that is working exactly on this problem, and we're just starting to figure out what's the best way to attack that and get the word out that people could vote. Either if you're in prison and can still vote, how to make that happen, and again, once you're released, how to get your voting rights back. So it's a good question. Again, if it was a disqualifying felony, they couldn't vote. But if it's not a non-disqualifying felony, they could vote, and they can vote absentee.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, one of the acceptable IDs that's listed in the Secretary of State's voter ID guide is a prison ID, because they know that I think when people go in, they lose all those IDs. So that's an acceptable ID. We'd like to work, and there are groups in the state that are working trying to reach that population also.
Okay. Prison ID. Interesting. I know there's another question that is on the board, but for those viewers that are out there today and tomorrow, if you are a registered voter, click like for us, please. Click like, and let's see how many, what our numbers look like. If you're not a registered voter, and if you need information on what you need to do, or from that level, just go ahead and put that information in the chat area, or just send a direct message someone will get back with you and with some information that you need. Like I said, I've met several people who haven't had an interest in this very information. They've taken my card and they've said, "Hey, I will get back with you on it." Most have not. I hope that they're getting the information that they need. That's another reason why we ask you viewers out there to go ahead and share. And I share as well. After the cast, I'll go in and share many different times, right? So does the league expand beyond Alabama?
Yes, the league is a national organization. As a matter of fact, we get a lot of our direction from the National League. Get a chance to give them a little bit of publicity, which I probably should start up front. The league, right, say it right now has, and this is the League of Women Voters nationally, has four main priorities. One is protect the freedom to vote. Number two is improve elections. They also want to reduce money's political influence and fight for fair redistricting. Now, what we do in Alabama is we take those national objectives and we tailor them down to, we keep them, but we kind of tailor them to our state. So there definitely is a National League of Women Voters.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, the president of the National League was in Huntsville about 2 weeks ago talking about something I don't usually think much about, but it was basically about handicapped access to voting, which is not a normal topic I thought about, but after sitting in a seminar for a day, it made me think quite a bit about it and some of the hurdles people have to overcome to be able to vote.
Right. So. Yeah. Those are, I've stood in some lines and I guess I really didn't, sorry, but I guess I really didn't think about those who are, happen to be handicapped or had some type of physical impairment. Geez, good information. So, remember, once again, like, share, get this information out to those who are looking for it. You don't know who's looking for it, but the sharing of this information will help that. So, Mr. Lorge, what else do you have there? You have a wealth of information that you're passing on to us. Anything else you would like to share with our viewers?
A couple of minutes. Let me. The biggest thing I guess people ask is how to get involved.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give you 4 possible ways. And of course, number one is to vote. And I think I've touched on this. Make sure you're registered, check your information, and make sure you vote. And get your friends and family to vote. Number 2, if you're interested in joining a league, we're always looking for more help. If you don't want to join, we always look for money to support our programs. And the other thing I want to say is participate in the process. And I mean, besides voting, they're always looking for poll workers. Now, I also am a poll worker, and I tell you, it's a long day. You're at the poll about 6 in the morning, and usually we get done about 8. A lot of people can't commit to the whole day. So there's a couple other options. There's poll watchers that work for a specific candidate or campaign. The good thing about that, you're not committed to the whole day. You can come do a half day or whatever that was. That gets you actually into the polls. Excuse me. You're basically an observer, but you're looking to see if there's any things, and you get training for that. And there's also poll monitors, which are people who are actually outside but doing similar things, kind of look, making sure of the access, making sure the rules are being followed, and they have some support, 800 numbers and stuff, so if there are any issues, you can help. So there's lots of different ways to get involved, and I urge everyone to get involved some way, is whatever strikes their fancy.
Right. Previously incarcerated, I guess that also depends on what the infraction was. Are they encouraged to get involved?
As far as being a poll worker, as far as I know, there's 2 requirements. One, you have to be a registered voter. So as long as they can register vote, and you have to work in the county you're living. That's the only thing. And so I see no reason why they couldn't. As far as the other jobs, I don't even think, I mean, the answer is no. I see no reason why they couldn't be involved. So.
I guess the reason why that question kind of came up in my mind was that I think that type of action, I think, could be helpful. For someone who it serves a great purpose, and when it comes to our city, our local, as well as our state and federal. So, with some publicity about voter fraud, how do you combat the stigma of voter fraud? Oh,
that's a tough one, and I guess the biggest thing is what I try to do is educate myself and look at reports and just try to, what the facts are. Right. And there was a report, and unfortunately, I don't remember the exact title, but it's put out by a very conservative group that basically went back, looked at the 2020 election and addressed all the allegations, basically said there is no evidence of any significant voter fraud. So,
yeah.
It's, I mean, and again, I think that's when the poll workers and the poll watchers, that's kind of what they're there for. They're looking for that kind of stuff, and they have it reported. So if you know, and again, and even if you're just a voter and you go in and vote and you see something that's you think might be questionable, you can call the judge of probate and talk to them, and they will go out and investigate and make sure. The last election, I got a call, and it was just someone who made a comment. I think it was just misunderstanding, but they thought someone was campaigning inside the polling place. They weren't, but it was just, we just made sure we kept our discussions where it couldn't be misinterpreted. You know, the Alabama now has a vote for a veteran campaign. And I think one of the persons was asking, you know, says, do you want to vote for a veteran, one of the stickers? And I think someone thought they were telling, well, you have to vote for veterans. So just misunderstanding.
Really?
So if you see anything and you have any doubts, like I say, contact your probate judge. They're in charge of the elections, and let them know, and they will get right on and investigate. I think that's probably the best way.
So what is normally, what's the position of the person who's in charge of that particular polling place? Is there normally someone? There
is an inspector at each polling location. They're really charged with making sure anything runs smoothly. And they'll address any issues. One thing I'll talk a little bit about is provisional ballots. If you get to the polling location and there's some issue, and it's usually for some reason you may not be on the voters' rolls, or you may have moved to not be right, there'll always be you can always cast what's called a provisional ballot, and there'll be a provisional ballot officer at the poll. You'll need to go to them. Unfortunately, there's a lot of paperwork you have to fill out. It will take you a little bit longer, but you can submit that. They will go investigate you can vote a provisional if you don't have a voter ID, and then you have till Friday of the week of election to show up with ID, and they'll count your ballot. Wow. The provisional ballot officer will talk to the board of registrars, and usually they'll say, okay, yeah, he's in the right place and stuff. So again,
provisional ballot. So can we take a step back?
Sure.
Let me get me some clarity on this ID, what you said about the ID. So if I show up, you're supposed to have an ID to vote, right?
You're supposed to have, and there's a booklet out, a list. There's, I'm guessing 20 to 25 things. I'm saying these days, because of new poll pads, 98% of people use their driver's license. But like the ID is just tell you who you are. The information has to be correct. So we've had people come with out-of-state license will work if people haven't changed their license or stuff. But again, the biggest ones I see are driver's license by far number one. A few people use passports. Another thing in this area, we get a lot of military IDs. Any government issued ID will work, and so a lot of military have those, and we'll use the military ID. Okay,
good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Well, I really appreciate we here at CNI Solution. We appreciate you coming and sharing this information with us. Like I told the folks that are out there that are viewing, and not just today, but who view this cast later on, let us know if you're a voter. Let us know that if you're registered to vote. I know there's privacy that's involved with that. And when I say click like, my intent is kind of get an idea of where we're at. I don't want you to reveal who you're voting for and what your intentions and all that great stuff, but we need to make some leaps and bounds. When I hear the numbers that you say, when you say 65% national election, approximately, right? And then in the local election, it dropped down to approximately 26%.
Low 20s.
Low 20s?
I think the Huntsville municipal elections were in the 20s for turnout.
Wow. And for those movers and shakers, there are a lot of people that are glad to see those numbers. Okay. And what we want to try to ensure that every voice is heard, and that is a part of it. I see we do have another question on the board. It says, does the league conduct any type of speeches in the low to moderate income neighborhoods? If so, how does that get out?
When they say speeches, we do our voter registration campaigns, our voter service campaigns. Usually the best way to do that is contact the local league, if you have one, and find out who their voter services coordinator is. And like, we'll set those up. It's good to go, say libraries. We've gone to boys and girls clubs, YMCAs and stuff, but you have a facility in that neighborhood. we'll be glad to come in there and provide all our services for you. So,
Okay. And potentially a mock.
I'm not going to, the mock elections are tough because that's the board of registrars, and
Okay.
I don't want to speak for them. The ones in Madison County do a great job. The ones in Limestone County where I am do a great job, but they're very busy, and I don't want to commit them to anything.
Okay. All right. I thought I'd ask. So
You could ask. They say, yeah, we'll be glad to do it.
Yeah. You mentioned that there are how many when it comes to the League of Women Voters, there are 9.
In Alabama, we have 9 different chapters. The 2 largest ones are Birmingham and Huntsville.
Mhm.
We also have them in Auburn. There's one over towards the Shoals. There's one in Tuscaloosa.
Yes.
There's one in Mobile. But one of our goals, we're trying to grow, and we'd like to have the whole state covered by a local league. Right now, there are areas we don't have local leagues. We will try to do the best. If we have a chapter nearby and they need something, we'll try to help them as best we can.
Okay.
And one more thing. The good thing about this age we live in with internet and email and stuff, we can do a lot of our things remotely. So even if we can't get someone there, if they contact the league, we'll try to help them. We can probably do it electronically.
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming by to see us and giving us all this great information. I know that November, is it 8th? November 8th is another critical time here in the great state of Alabama and other places across the nation as well. But let your voice be heard. Get out and vote. I do not know at this point when the deadline for the registration, but do take a look. I mean, there you go. Alabama, what's that website? Alabamavotes.gov.
Yeah.
So, it's the best thing to do is kind of get on it right now to ensure that you are registered. And one thing I'm going to do just for, because I know our Dr. Iris Fry talked about it in our cast that we did about voters. If you haven't voted in a minute, please go and check to see if your registration is still active. Because if not, you may have to re-register. You don't want to show up on polling day. If a person does show up on polling day and their voter's registration has expired, what?
Well, it should never really expire, but if there's a process that they go through where they mail out a card, and I always get it confused. If the first card gets returned to them, they send out a second card. If that doesn't come back, they remove you from the rolls. If you're not on the rolls, you can't vote. If you're just in an inactive status, then you can vote. So it gets a little bit confusing. The best thing to do is go check in advance. And one other thing you mentioned, again, 2020, we used a lot of absentee voting. There's a lot of people that use absentee voting. If you're going to do that, well, let me tell you 2 things. You need to do early because of the postal system. We recommend at least 3 weeks. By the time you mail in your application, it gets to the board or the absentee election manager. They mail it back to you, and then you fill it out and mail it back. We say that will take up to 3 weeks. So if you're going to vote absentee, get on it now.
Yes.
The other thing, there's an option that a lot of people don't know about, is that if you have a valid reason to vote absentee, like you're going to be out of the county on that day, you can just go down to the absentee election manager, which is usually the circuit court clerk in your county, and vote. Just go down there, and it's almost like voting in person. You can go down there, they'll check your ID, give you your ballot, fill it out, they'll witness it for you, and they'll take it. So if you get within that 3-week time period of the election and you think you're going to have to vote absentee, I recommend going down and doing in-person absentee voting.
Well, I'm gonna follow that up with: is there a proof of action that's necessary for that person who's doing that process? So, what if I'm going to the beach and we'll be down in Daytona Beach, Florida, and is that a worthy? And because I feel as though personally, that's just Brewster here, that there are going to be some issues when it comes to someone arriving to vote in that manner. And especially if they don't have proof that they are going to be.
At one time when I was still working, I thought I was going to be on temporary duty travel on election day. I went in to vote absentee, then trip got canceled. I got worried. I talked to them. They said, if you thought you were going to be out of town and vote absentee, it turns out you didn't. There isn't any check on there. The only thing I've been told, if you consistently vote absentee, that might raise a red flag about, is this person really eligible to vote absentee, but generally, I don't think there's much of a question about, you having to prove that, here's an airline ticket that I'm going to be out of town that day.
Okay. So for all my family down in Talladega, I know a lot of them work out of town. They're out of town workers out of the Talladega area. Definitely take a look at that and get your vote in. Here in the great state of Alabama, get your vote in. So, hey, thanks again. We appreciate you stopping by. For all those folks out there, hey, take a look at CNIsolutions.org's website, where we're having a donations campaign, and we also have another campaign that we have coming up, and I'm excited about it, and I will reveal it at a later date. Anything that you can afford to assist us with to keep our program running, assisting the community, bringing these types of broadcasts, this type of information to the public. I really enjoy it. I know Charles Fry does. He just happened not to be in town today. We're talking to some great people and getting some great information out. Information that you can go back, you can timestamp it, send it to a friend, say, hey, look at minute 19.21. You don't even have to view the whole thing, but we would like for you to view the whole thing. So with that being said, hey, we're going to go ahead and you do enjoy your evening. Just remember, your yesterday is not your today, and your today is not your tomorrow. Have a great night. Thank you.